Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our new show, The Red, White, and You. It's finally here. I've been wanting to get guests on this show for months, and we've made it happen. Finally, once and for all, down here in Clark Studios out of Rochester, New York. We are broadcasting live around the world, and we're going to bring you live guests every day at 3 p.m. so you can hear the truth about what's going on in the conservative world, because somebody's got to bring it to you guys, and we're not going to cut out or edit out anything. This is raw, unplugged, and today we are joined by, and I'm very honored to launch our show with my very first guest ever, Christina Higley. She's here with us live today. Christina, also in upstate New York. If you don't know who Christina is, well, you're sure going to get to know her, because she is the reason the kids are in school today. She has done nothing but fight for them, advocate for them, and our kids are finally going back, all because of this wonderful and brave and courageous woman. And today we have an amazing show for you, and we're going to let her tell you all about it. Hi, Christina. How are you?
Hey, Matt. I'm doing great. This is such an honor. I'm so excited to help you kick off this new show.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. First of all, guys, this is our very first show ever, The Red, White, and You, with guests. So there's a lot of technology involved. Can I just ask everybody if you can hear us okay? So can you hear me okay? Can you hear Christina okay? Can everybody hear us okay? Because it's interactive, and I want to make sure that we are coming through just fine. If you guys can just throw me a yes, you can hear me, that would be excellent. I'm just waiting for a couple comments to come in. Can you guys hear us okay? I assume
that would be great. Just
they are, because I don't, I'm not getting any, nobody's telling me that you can't. So let's get into the show. Christina, first of all, thanks again for joining us. You have a massive following. I mean, not just here in upstate New York, but all around the state of New York. You've gained traction. You've advocated for the children. You've gone up against school districts. I think there's 16 pending lawsuits now. Tell me, how did this whole thing start? Why did you take the lead on this entire situation?
Yeah, so really, this is beyond my wildest imagination where we would be a year later. Basically, last May, I started a Facebook group here locally in Rochester looking for other concerned parents who wanted their kids back in school, wanted to know what's happening in September. And really, it became its own beast. And, you know, at this point, all the children are not back in school full time. And we've been fighting it at every level. We have lawsuits pending at the state level against our governor and our health commissioner, all the way down to our county level and now our school districts. And, you know, for people who aren't familiar with us, you could check us out at reopenOurSchools.com and on Facebook, Rock for Educational Freedom. It's become a movement. People want their children in schools. They want them to have a normal education. They want these masks gone. They want the distancing gone. They want their children to just be able to be children. And we are fighting a battle of just such a magnitude. And that's where I am at this point in my life. We're fighting for our children.
Good. And tell me now you're local here in upstate New York. And you pulled your own kids out of school last year when we started to realize things were just on a downward spiral. Is that right? You pulled your children out of school?
I did, yes. So as I've mentioned to my followers for many months now, that these are obviously personal decisions, may not work for every family, but my husband and I decided that we were going to homeschool our children for the time being. Never thought I'd be a homeschool family at all. But with everything going on in our school district and in the state, we wanted to have our children have the most normal life possible, as their mother and their father, to some extent, took on these corrupt people.
So let's talk about that. So clearly you were furious with the situation, just like we all were. I mean, last year, you know, the kids, I think they pulled the kids out of school in March. This is over a year now that we've all been dealing with this. We thought maybe they would go back to school to finish their last couple of months. That didn't happen. At what point did you realize, I got to do something about this? I got to step up, because if I don't, nobody is. At what point did you really start getting involved in this entire fight?
Yeah, so I mean, it was a pretty quick deterioration with my own three children from the time schools closed, middle of March, till the time we hit the end of the school year. And I just realized, man, like this isn't sustainable long term with 100 Zooms a day and children basically self-teaching them material, me trying to work full time, my husband working full time. So really by May, when it was time for us to vote on our school budget and vote new people into our Board of Education and to start thinking about September, I felt like I needed to like activate and surround myself with other like-minded parents because I was just getting a really bad vibe that like this wasn't just 2 weeks to flatten a curve. This was like becoming an ongoing issue. And I have to say, I think my gut has served me pretty well because here we are, and school still is not back to full-time K through 12, at least where we live here in New York State.
Right. Now, the first time that I ever heard about you was when I started seeing these no school, no taxes signs show up. I guess it was no normal school, no taxes. That's when I started joining the rally circuit and really started coming out and supporting you. I hear that didn't do too well last year, but this year I hear it's going, I mean, people are into it. People are at the point where they're just at breaking point now. They're fed up. I've joined that whole bandwagon with the whole no school, no taxes group. So it didn't do too well this year. Do you think we're going to get it done this year? Do you think people are really at kind of they're at breaking point and on their last straw here where they're going to really do something as drastic as not pay their tax bill? I mean, are we there now as a county here in upstate New York?
Yeah, so I think you and I joke, right, with our followers, and we're like, "Oh, I told you so," you know, like,
Right.
and I hate to say it, but I told you so, right? Like, last year, the media here locally painted me out to be this hysterical mother who just wanted my kids in school, wanted daycare for my children. People had horrible things to say about me. You need to be patient. Kids will be back in school full time come September. They'll be back in full time come January. And the reality is, people just had on these rose colored glasses that things were going to be okay. And people also, were like, I'm scared not to pay my taxes. And how dare I vote no to my school budget because it may hurt my child in the theater program.
Right.
And people just had a lot of excuses. But the reality is now, if you still haven't seen it as a parent and as a taxpayer, they've burned your children. They've burned your family. Like, they aren't doing what's best, our school districts, for our kids. So yeah, there are a lot of really ticked off parents that I wish could have, kind of felt the way
Right.
I was feeling last year. But let's face it, this year, like, they are just done. They've wasted an entire academic year for their children. They've totally taken advantage of our taxpayer dollars. And we still have like zero accountability, zero transparency. So really, I think people are seeing the only way that we're going to regain control of this is through hitting them where it hurts. And
Right.
the reality is, these folks don't care about your kids. These are corporations, in essence, these school districts. They care about the money and the power and the status. Your children come like dead last on the list.
And you said, you talk about they.
Professionals.
Yeah, you talk about they. Who's they? I mean, we're all trying to wonder or figure out here, who the hell is calling the shots? Who's pulling the strings here? Because every time I try to dig deep here and uncover who's responsible, I feel like everybody points the finger at the other department, and we're never going to get to the bottom of this when everybody keeps playing the blame game. So I know you've done a lot more research into this and being on the ground with lawsuits going after all these departments. Who's they?
Yeah.
Who's really responsible for this? Because everybody out there, these parents, they want to know who's responsible for their kids not back in school. Who are we going after here?
Yeah. So everybody who has like a piece in this puzzle does a really good job at like pointing fingers every which direction to throw just the average Joe like you and I off the beaten path.
Right.
The reality is we have more local control than we want to admit, or quite frankly, our school districts want to admit. And the reality is the school districts have more control than they're going to let on. And the reality is, they'll blame the governor and say that it's the Department of Health that's making it so that they can't open, and they'll blame the health commissioner here in the county. They'll blame everybody. But at the end of the day, they are to blame. Your school district is to blame. They're not fighting for your children. They're not doing what's best for the families. They're not doing, what's best with our tax dollars. It comes down to the schools. And until the superintendents and the boards of education and folks at the local level are ready to fight back, this will never change. It will never change. And the reason I say this is I'm not just making this up. We can look downstate in Long Island, for example, where large school districts are open full time, K through 12. We go an hour down the thruway from Rochester to Onondaga, which is Syracuse. They are now opening K through 12. So the reality is, if you have strong leaders and you have people who, their conviction is to get these kids in school and do the right thing, they can make it happen. But unfortunately, we have a lot of cowards, a lot of power hungry people who aren't doing the right thing because quite frankly, there's something in it for them.
Well, and that was going to be my next question. Why in here in upstate New York are we? It's almost like we're on our own agenda here in certain counties upstate. We're not following the science. The CDC has clearly dropped the social distancing guidelines down to 3 feet. Everybody's slowly starting to go back to school. And I've spoke a lot of about this on my lives, more on a national level, saying, look at what's going on in these Republican states. Why is it in these deep blue states like New York, do we feel like we can take it upon ourselves to play by our own rules, which is ultimately holding our children hostage? What's going on here in upstate New York that we are not following federal guidelines?
Right. So there's a lot of money involved, right? And I mean, really, we could talk for hours about this. When you start to peel back the layers of the onion, right? We have the teachers union. We have, big time donors, that contribute to the unions and to a lot of these folks that are leading to this chaos. Mm-hmm. We have, health systems in place that, they have major invested interest in, I don't dare say the word, right? Starts with a V, wanting to give all of our children Vs, right?
Right. So, which is another major issue I have a problem with.
Right.
And that's something we're going to have to fight. Absolutely.
A whole other show. But the reality is, there's a lot of money in it for these people. And quite frankly, there's no better way to summarize it than they're holding your children hostage to fulfill their agenda. Because if they let your kids back in school and everything goes well, there's no need for all of this hysteria and for, for all of this legislation and for, the magic V's and for, there is a lot going on here and there are a lot of players, but at the end of the day, it all comes back to money and power. And, parents, for example, they're so worn down at this point, Matt, that when the school district throws them a few crumbs, they're so thankful, right? We're seeing that with the proms and the graduations and such right now.
The fact that we're cooperating and acting like this is only fueling the insanity even further. And I think you and I had a conversation about this the other day, and I said, I'm so sick and tired of people applauding Governor Cuomo or the CDC or the local health officials, applauding them that they can finally go and sit with their mom or dad in a nursing home. And I'm thinking, what the hell is wrong with us? Why are we sitting here applauding these people? We should have kicked the door down months ago and said, it's not up to you to decide whether I go see my parents or not. And I feel like we're getting to that point with the school districts as well. When are we going to literally kick the door down and say, enough? The kids are going back, whether you like it or not.
Right. Or send your kids to school without the mask.
Exactly. I mean,
tell Johnny, don't put the mask on. If they got a problem, have them call mom. But it's going to take large amounts of people to stand up against this and to push back and say, you're not going to continue to do this to my family. I say to parents all the time, they complain about filling out, like that health survey every morning. Johnny doesn't have a fever. Johnny didn't go to the Bahamas. Johnny didn't, whatever. Stop filling it out. Stop. That's their problem. Make the nurse have to take their temperature down in the classroom. Stop, telling them every time your child has a sniffle. They have a mental health day. It's not the school's business what they're at home doing. But these parents are just so compliant because they just want their kid to be able to go to school. They're willing to do pretty much anything. And now for the last year, we've called it. I mean, everything that's happened, I've called to this point.
Yeah. I've been following that.
But where are we now? I said, keep complying, and your kid will need, to get tested. Your kid will need to get the magic V. Your kid, and every single time that we've said these things are going to happen, they've happened, and then people are outraged. Well, stop being outraged. If you're not going to stand up and do something and push back, of course these powerful people are going to continue to push their agenda and see what they can get away with.
Well, why do you think they keep pushing? I mean, you talk a lot about the money because there's money. Are you able to give us any examples here of situations where we know this is in fact about money and it has nothing to do with our kids? I mean, I have a strong hunch, and I spoke about this vocally on many different shows, about the fact that our teachers' unions are absolutely holding our children hostage for their own political and financial gain. And we all know the Biden administration is going to do nothing about it because they owe the teachers' unions for their votes. I mean, the unions are one of the largest contributors to the Biden administration. So it's no surprise that we don't hear anything from our own president and anybody at a federal level. But locally, what's going on here? I mean, what do they have to gain financially that's preventing our kids, or at least allowing them to continue to play, or incentivizing them to continue to play this game?
Right. So, I mean, this has been 10 years in the works, at least, Matt. Like, there's been talks across the state forever about wanting to, like, just totally switch up the way that we do education here in New York State. And, there's rumors, flying around town now about this idea of regionalism, right? Where we get rid of school districts and we have, let's say, like 3 main school districts, shall we say, within Monroe County. And it's this idea of equity, right? They push it as like, oh, it will be equitable and everyone will get a great education, and the disadvantaged will be able to go to great schools with, folks from communities that are thriving and such. It's BS. It's all about money. It saves the county money. It saves the state money. It's a big agenda going on, and the folks that are highest up in the teachers unions, they are right in the middle of all of it. And I think that unless parents really start to push back now, in the next 2 years, mark my words, we should probably save this moment. I'm going to save a clip of this. I'm telling your listeners here in Monroe County and in upstate New York, school districts as you know them and school as you know it will not exist. Mark this date and time, folks. April 21st, 2021. 3:22 p.m. Christina Higley said schools in 2 years will not look like they do today.
And you know what?
Mark
I believe
my
you.
words.
I believe you. And I think you guys all need to take Christina's words very seriously, because I've received tons of messages regarding where we're headed here in New York, as far as how the districts are drawn, where our kids are going to even be allowed to go to school. Our tax dollars aren't even going to be going to our same school districts. Is that right? I mean, are you able to shed? Just before we get into this, 1 second, I just want to read a comment here by John June. John says they, okay, because we were talking about they, and I said, who's they? So I assume John is answering to this. John says, they are the same people that bought out our country and treasury departments from Woodrow Wilson in 1913, starting the biggest deceptions and Ponzi scheme ever created. Rothschilds, Rockefellers, DuPont, Carnegies. Do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah.
As far as they is concerned?
Well, yeah, I mean, I see his point and where he's coming from for sure. And again, I just alluded to too, that this stuff has been going on a long time. Right. It's just that people have been so blind to it, or we're so busy with our daily lives, that unless you're looking at it and you're putting the pieces together, you just don't realize it. But unfortunately, I've said this so many times in the last 11 months, COVID has literally dropped people's pants to their ankles. Yeah. It's exposed them. It's exposed their agendas. It's exposed what they've been planning for decades, quite frankly, as he mentioned. And they're using our children as part of their agenda. That's the bottom line. And it's disgusting, right? Yeah. Like, leave the kids alone.
Erica says, I believe our district kept the kids out so they could claim they don't have the resources to bring them back. This resulted in our district getting extra funding to be able to bring them back. I 100% agree with Erica. Yeah. I think the entire thing, I think the unions have been waiting for this moment for, like you said, decades. And Christina, you'll remember a while back, I started posting the unions here in New York. It is in my opinion that the unions here in New York are now engaged in an illegal strike. When they, after time, when we knew it was safe for the kids to go back and they refused to send the kids back, that to me said our unions are officially on an illegal strike. Very similar to Chicago. We saw it in Chicago. Chicago, the unions, the teachers' unions in Chicago rinsed the city out of $100 million. If you remember that, okay, $100 million they rinsed that city from, and it still wasn't good enough. When the city said, "Here's your money, go. We know you totally held us hostage to it, but if that's going to shut you guys up and get these kids back in school, here's your damn money. Go do something," and it still wasn't good enough. And you remember, the teachers remained on strike. And Lori Littlefoot said, "If you continue this, you are on an illegal strike. If you guys do not get back in the classroom." Finally, push came to shove, and they slowly started into their hybrid model. I feel like New York has followed the exact same Democratic playbook that California's followed, that Chicago, Detroit, Michigan, and other Democratic states have followed. And we're seeing it here now. And even after the CDC has reduced the social distancing guidelines to 3 feet, we still have a problem for some reason. So yes, I agree with you. This entire thing has never been about our kids. It's been about money. Who fights for us? I mean, tell us about these lawsuits, because that was it for me. That was the straw that broke my back, at least. I was excited. For those of you who don't know, Christina Malley Higley is with us today. She has led the charge in getting our kids back to school here in upstate New York. I'm sure most of you know who Christina Malley Higley is. If you don't, she's been a huge advocate for our children to get them back into the classroom. She's even taken it so far as to file 16 lawsuits against the districts. And I'll let you explain a little bit more. Why did you feel that it was acceptable? When did you realize what they're doing to our children is illegal? Because you only file a lawsuit if you believe that what's happening is corrupt and it's illegal. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we started out our approach filing lawsuits at the state level. And we filed, I think, about 14 different counties of lawsuits across New York State, from, here all the way down through Long Island. And at that point, the state made it pretty clear that, like, we've given the districts enough leeway to be able to get open. And then we were like, okay, we got to go to the county level. So we filed a lawsuit, as you mentioned, here in Monroe County against 16 school districts, as well as our county executive, Adam Bello, and health commissioner, Dr. Michael Mendoza. And really, we were saying, how are the private schools able to be open full time since September? How are schools in this county, downstate, able to be open full time K through 12? It's not because of New York State, which you keep blaming. It's because of you, and it's your negligence and borderline, I believe, child abuse with what they're putting our kids through, knowing that there is a mental health crisis and that children are truly suffering. They're falling behind their peers in other states. And, for example, here, if you were to take a high school student at one of the public schools going 2 days a week and compare them next to, say, a Catholic school child going 5 days a week, there's a major gap there, right, between the quality of education and what they're learning and such. So yeah, we took the charge. We had over 500 families that volunteered to be plaintiffs here in Monroe County. I have to, some days I don't even know how I do it, because I serve almost as a clearinghouse for so many people's problems and stories and such. Just the stories of families and what they were going through was horrendous. And we had to act upon it. So as many people know, our court case has been a saga. It's changed hands now 3 times with 3 different
Why is
judges.
that? Let's talk about that for a second, because for those of you who don't know what's going on, their lawsuits have been dropped now by 3 different judges here in Monroe County. Apparently, they recused the cases. Why are they doing this? How are they allowed to get away with this? I mean, is this not corruption at the highest level? If a judge keeps kicking the can down the road, not willing to listen to any of these cases? I mean, who protects us if our own judges are throwing this out? Before you answer that question, let me just read a comment here. Erica says, Onondaga County is no better. It's all bait and switch. Once you get open, it's some other selling point from local government to the school districts. Not all Onondaga County schools are open equally. It is all about the money. So absolutely, Erica, and I think Christina has just touched on that. So let's talk about these judges that continue to recuse, the people that we rely on for justice have completely failed us here in Monroe County. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I want to point out something too to listeners who may not be familiar with our cases and the judges involved. All of our judges have been considered conservative judges as far as the party line that they run with. And so it goes to show that even though you may get a conservative Republican judge, it's still political, right? So the first judge just disappeared. We weren't even informed by the courts why she was no longer on our case. We have an order to show cause that was signed by a second judge out of nowhere. And we were like, wow, okay, great news. So in order to show cause, for folks that are wondering, it fast tracks our case. In essence, it kind of like blows us past discovery. It's really good news for plaintiffs, quite frankly, because it's just the judge is basically saying, I'm ready to make a decision. The defendant has X amount of days to let me know, why I shouldn't just give them a favorable judgment and move on, make a judgment. So we got our order to show cause. We sit for weeks. We have a court date. We're excited. They respond. We reply. We're ready to go. Not even, 22 hours before we were supposed to be in court. Finally, judge recuses himself. And he uses a part of the recusal law. So it wasn't like he said, I have a conflict of interest with an expert witness, or I didn't realize that the plaintiff was my cousin, or it wasn't like a normal reason that you typically see when a judge recuses themselves. They basically used a section of the recusal law, which stated that if the judge would be embarrassed, or his family would be embarrassed, or they were, could possibly be in danger, that they didn't need to cite a reason why, which is basically, like I've said publicly now many times, it's a catch-all.
Right. So basically,
we don't know if the guy got paid off. We don't know if really he was threatened. We have no clue, and we'll never know because of the way the recusal laws are written. So basically, he left literally thousands of families who were depending on him for a decision.
Who have also spent a lot of money on these lawsuits with you. I mean, this costs money. 16 lawsuits. A lot of people gave their own money towards these lawsuits that they probably don't have in the first place.
Right. And we had major donors too that came forward that wanted to make this happen because they value education. They understand that that's what our future leaders need and such, and they see the crisis in our community with schools. And so basically judge recuses himself in the 12th hour. We end up getting reassigned to another judge. We had our hearing over 2 weeks ago. We thought it went well. Judge said that, I'll have a decision for you shortly. Shortly, one would think would be within a week, especially on a matter where, our attorneys are saying, Judge, these children are literally like in psychiatric holds at hospitals, threatening to commit suicide, self-harming. We need to get control of the situation and get kids back into a normal routine. And here we are 2.5 weeks later, and it seems like we have another judge who's just waiting for the situation to work itself out or running out the clock.
Lori,
no urgency.
So basically, they give you no answer whatsoever. And as judges in this county, they are not upholding justice for any of us right now. They're dropping the ball, and they're failing us miserably. Lori says everyone is corrupt, compromised, bought out, or threatened. Doesn't matter if they are Republican, Dem, liberal, or independent. Lori, this has been my biggest frustration. Christina, I know it's been a huge frustrating point for you. And you're right, Lori, you're absolutely right. And that's the saddest part about this entire thing, that it doesn't matter what side of the fence you sit on. I mean, at one point it used to mean something to be a conservative, or it meant something to be a Democrat. Right now, we can't get anybody to fight the other party for what we believe in. And I think this is what happened with the judges, that at the end of the day, it almost sounds like they're all in bed with each other to begin with. It's almost like they tell us what we want to hear, Tell the parent, let's just tell the parents what they want to hear to get them to back off. And then we'll all go out for drinks and high five each other after. Do you feel like this is kind of what's going on? That they're playing the game in the eyes of their constituents, but behind closed doors, it's all a big handshake and buddy. Let's go out to dinner and forget this thing ever happened.
Yeah. And this certainly isn't the platform or the time to get into the weeds, right? But I can tell everybody that there are a lot of dirty little secrets. And the more that we are peeling back, again, those layers, we're learning about what's really going on here. And I say to folks all the time, I went into this just wanting my kids back in school. But what I've uncovered and what I continue to learn, right, it's just shocking. And literally, like, we need to continue to push back and expose and fight, because these people are not serving our best interests. And it's truly just so disappointing. There's corruption everywhere. And I believe that Monroe County here in New York State is truly the epicenter for a lot of really bad behavior and corruption.
It's sad that we are the leaders, and that we've kind of taken it upon ourselves to lead the way in corruption here in upstate New York.
We're like striking out every which way that we turn, not just on the education issue, but on many fronts, unfortunately, here. And the political climate is really driving it.
How do we change? How do we change things here? I mean, ultimately, as far as elected officials are concerned, we're the ones who actually have the opportunity to get rid of anybody who's not fighting. And I said this a few days ago. I said, listen, we're at breaking point with the Republican Party. And again, this conversation isn't really about Republicans and Democrats, and it shouldn't really be a political one. But an example I'm trying to make is that a few days ago, I said, listen, nobody's fighting here. Somebody asked me, Matt, what do you think the most frustrating part about everything that's happening today? And I said, nobody's fighting. The people are powerless. We used to be able to rally together, stand up to government, or stand up to superintendents or Board of Education members. We used to be able to walk in, have our say, and influence the powers to be. We can't do that anymore. It's almost like we go up against these people, and that's even if they let us in the door. I mean, nothing is in person anymore. So from what I hear, these Board of Education meetings, they're not even allowing people to comment anymore or voice their opinion. I mean, these parents have been completely silenced to the point where the teachers' unions in the school districts have snapped their fingers and literally made them disappear. We have no voice.
Yeah. And it's as bad that, like, even in my school district, we haven't been in person the entire year for a Board of Education meeting. And if you want to speak at a Board of Education meeting, you have to sign up 1 week in advance. They only let three parents speak for 3 minutes. So literally they're controlling the narrative. They're controlling who's going to be allowed, who's going to be able to say what. They even plant their own people amongst the speakers, because they know what's coming for them, right? So they have to find, like, the mom who loves masking and loves the schools being closed and loves remote education. These people are evil.
So they're playing media right now. It sounds like they are playing media, which we all know here in Rochester, New York, is very biased.
Yep.
And let's talk about that for a second. Let's talk about the narrative. What has the local media done to help you in your cause? Have they documented it fairly? I think I know the answer to that, but I'd like you to talk about that. What has the local media done to help you get your message out and support your cause?
Yeah, so early on, I had a ton of media attention, and it was because they wanted to paint me out to be a grandma killer. I wanted to send my kids back to school, spread COVID everywhere, kill grandmas, whatever. Right. And when I fought back, basically, and I kind of took on, so basically I realized that the news wasn't going to do it. The local news wasn't going to do it for me. So I built my social media platforms. I built my website. I started networking with folks who could give me, like, a platform on a radio station or whatever the case may be. And I basically just went on full attack myself. Like, you cannot depend on the local media to cover this. And it's very evident that they're bought or they're in bed with our county officials and such. The narrative is always one-sided. And really, for me, I've realized that, even this weekend, I had numerous media inquiries wanting me to talk on a particular hot topic here in town. And I said to them, until you're ready to expose the corruption and really report on what's going on here, don't contact me. I'll get the word out. I'll get the word out regardless. Quite frankly, Matt, as much as I do, that this type of platform, we can get our word out regardless.
Absolutely.
So if they don't want to cover what we have to say, we'll find a new way to get it done. And better.
We'll cover it. Exactly. And we'll cover it ourselves. I mean, listen, people, all of you watching the show today, listen, we are living proof. You don't need the media to get your message out because they're not even going to report on it properly. You are the media. We are the media. Social media has now given all of us a voice to speak without a narrative twisting the truth.
Well, and we know that we're getting the job done because when I have people sending me clips from their local Board of Education meetings with the superintendents literally like foaming at the mouth, ticked off over this, social media group with this woman leading the charge of parents who's lying and, trying to take down his school district, that you're onto something. That you're hitting a nerve. Right. That you're speaking truth. And they're ticked because, folks like myself, because they thought at the beginning, again, I was some random mom who didn't want to watch my kids during the day and just wanted to kill people and get my kids back in school at all costs.
Right.
We're getting 25,000 views in 48 hours and we're spreading the truth. So what I say to the media is, okay, I'll do it myself.
Right.
It's unfortunate, but you just they're going to push the agenda that works for the politicians and the folks here locally, and that's just how it is.
And I want you to touch on this real quick. I want you to talk about here, Jackie, real quick. Jackie says local media is biased and weak. They refuse to address this with both sides. There is only one side, and sadly, it is very liberal. We need both sides. And Jackie, I love that. And listen, I'm all for checks and balances. I'm all for Democrats and Republicans. We need each other to balance each other out. But I think the frustration lies with the fact that there is no balancing today. We are so far left with what's going on at both a national level and a local level that there is no balance. There's a lot of checks, but there's no balances here. So it doesn't matter whether you agree with one side or the other. The point is that we're supposed to be coming together to have a debate and to have an honest discussion and to meet each other in the middle. I feel like that's been lost both at a national level and now at an educational level. Why is that? Let's talk about the parents for a second. Why aren't the parents fighting? Do they not want the kids back in school? Do they want the kids to go back to school with masks on? Because these health officials, they got to be listening to somebody, right? Are we all too much of a coward to fight, or are there just more people who actually support this narrative than do not?
Right. There's way more people that support this narrative. I mean, it's amazing to me to see a news article now about school reopening and about school related issues. Back, maybe 9 months ago, I was the minority. I was the one typing the crazy comments like, open the schools, who cares? Take off your mask.
Right.
Now you look at these news articles just this last week and it's just one person after another from all different demographics that are like, open the freaking schools.
Right.
Why are we still talking about this? So I believe the momentum's there. And you and I had a very interesting conversation about this, that I think that now is the time that people really, this is like my new motto. I feel like I should tattoo it across my head. It's stand up or shut up. And I hate to say that, but running all these Facebook groups and having between all these groups over 30,000 followers, the reality is I think social media gives us a place to come and vent and to commiserate and to complain and all of the above. But if that's where it ends for you as a parent or you as a concerned citizen, it's not enough.
Right.
And you may not be like Matt or I, or, you know, the folks that are like truly like leading the charge and are comfortable with this type of exposure. But what are you doing that's like actionable that will actually then create a result? Because if more people are taking to the streets and complaining and, you know, acting upon their frustration the same way that they do as keyboard warriors in their homes, it would be amazing. It would just, you know, so I just ask folks that we have to channel our energy differently. And the reality is, I've come to the conclusion, it was a hard lesson learned. The reality is, no one is going to get this job done. No one's going to look into these people. No one's going to pressure them. No one's going to put the fire to them when it comes to our like local politicians, our boards of education and such. The people that are getting the dial to move are folks like you and I and our followers who are literally holding these people to the flame day in and day out. Don't depend on your legislator to do it for you. Don't depend on the county executive.
Clearly, we cannot.
Don't depend on these people.
Right.
The bottom line is, I look at what our organization has done and some other similar organizations that are, you know, fighting all different battles here over the last year. We, average people, we're the ones moving the dial. So I ask people constantly in my network, and I'm going to ask them here on this show, is that you need to stand up or sign off Facebook and shut up, because staying on Facebook complaining all day long is not going to get us to the finish line. And at the end of the day, I tell folks all the time, don't complain to me. Don't thank me. Don't anything me unless you're out there doing whatever you
get out there and do something yourself.
Yeah. Write a letter, make a phone call.
You're right.
Anything.
It's a very sad day, Christina, when activists have to take over the responsibilities of our politicians, because our politicians are not getting the job done. They're not. So hence the reason that we are all so vocal today. Tell me about so Christina is fighting for our kids. For those of you who are just joining us, she has led the charge. She's filed several lawsuits against Monroe County school districts. She's the reason, no joke, she is the reason we are this far. She's the reason our kids have finally gone back to school. But the fight is far from over, and people are really starting to get very annoyed with you, Christina. Tell me about the letter. You're getting sued now. I saw that. You know, when you...
Not quite yet. Okay. I'm waiting any minute for the lawsuit to hit my
Okay, so tell me about the letter you got. So Christina's been very vocal. She's been very active. She's called out these politicians. She's called out the health officials. She's called out the school districts and then unions and the Board of Education members. Well, they didn't like that. So they sent you a cease and desist letter. I know you did a live on it the other day. Can you tell me more about that letter?
Yeah. So my local superintendent, he doesn't like me, because the reality is, I know his games. I know who he is. I have people on a regular basis confiding in me, letting me know the terrible things that he's done to them, whether it's his employees, other parents in the district. So, you know, I have a right as a taxpayer to ask questions, and we all should be asking a lot of freaking questions of our boards of education, our superintendents. And, you know, this many months in, I haven't heard from him.
So you're asking questions. You're asking. See, this is where we are in New York right now. You get crucified for asking questions.
Right.
If you ask too many more questions, you will get a letter telling you to cease and desist, to shut up and cut it out, which is what's happened to you.
Yeah. Asking questions is defamation nowadays, apparently.
Yeah.
So like, for example, I questioned my local superintendent, which caused the cease and desist. I said, how much money are you making from the vaccine clinics that you're holding at the local schools for the high school students? Because I happen to know that the owner of the urgent care's husband works for the school district. So I just asked a question. Is the school district making any money from this partnership? And it was defamation. How dare you accuse us of such a thing?
And you didn't, it was a question. You didn't accuse anybody.
I said, how much money is Carmen Gumina?
The very reasonable question.
The vaccinations. And if it's zero, great, it's zero. But instead, again, you got to think there's some truth probably to my question.
Well, the fact that they're getting so upset about it and asking you to stop talking about it leads me to believe they're feeling a little bit guilty.
Exactly. There's a lot of this going on in the district, getting exchanged through all different deals, whether they're going to be public and forthcoming about it or whether I'm just going to expose it. So, but yeah, we nowadays as parents and taxpayers, we get cease and desist for asking the hard questions and for making people have to be accountable. And that's okay because, hey, this is the first time, Matt, in 11 months that he's given me a response. And I know I'm onto something because I obviously struck a nerve.
Right.
So I know I'm onto something. So that I thank him for the letter because it means I'm onto something.
I want to read you this comment right now, and I think it's important that we address this. Kristen Sloan says, "My brother is a Rochester Central School District teacher. He wants to work." And thank you. And listen, for those of you who are teachers watching this show right now, we want nothing more than to support you. This is not a gripe with the teachers. This is a gripe with the school districts, with the teachers' unions, with the health officials, with the state officials. This is a gripe with everybody who stands in the way of getting our kids back to school. And if you are a teacher who does not want to go back to school, then I'm sorry, you're in the way. But for all of you out there who want to get back to school, who are begging to get back to school, I just want to say thank you. And I mean that. We all mean that. We want to say thank you so much for fighting with us. And we're sorry that you're caught in the middle of this. Because I used to run my mouth. For those of you who have been following me for a while, Christina, you know, I used to run my mouth all day long against the teachers. And I realized after talking to so many teachers, I quickly realized this is not their fault. They're not the ones who are asking for this. As a matter of fact, more teachers want to get back. This is hell just as much for them as it is for us. So why aren't their own districts listening to them?
Yeah, I mean, so here's where there's kind of we need to kind of separate this. So there are the good, hardworking teachers, the teachers that my children have been so lucky to have here in my school district. I say it all the time. As bad as virtual learning was last year, my kids had some of the best teachers here in the school district. Where the problems kind of come in is the union leaders and the folks that are working directly with the state and with, you know, the union at the state level and having the conversations with the superintendents and such. They aren't representing the best interest of the hardworking, average, everyday teacher. If anything, they've screwed them. Mm-hmm. These teachers now are doing double the work, having to maintain a virtual classroom in addition to teaching students that are coming all different days a week on a crazy schedule. They're having to wear their masks and their shields, and, you know, they can't have the kids sitting too close. And I hear these stories from teachers because people think I'm a teacher hater. I'm a union hater.
Right.
I'm a union member through SUNY. Many of my followers know I'm a teacher at the college level. I hate my union. But the reality is the dues come out of my paycheck every month. They speak on my behalf. They make cruddy decisions on our behalf. It's not the average teacher who doesn't want to be in school. Yeah, you have a few of them who are really milking it for all it's worth. They love the arrangement. They're headed towards retirement, whatever. But the majority of teachers, they do want to be in school. It's the union leaders, the folks at the state level, your superintendents. Those are the folks that are really holding everyone hostage. And Matt, these teachers are messaging me on a regular basis. They are scared to death and fearful to speak out to their union and to their superintendents because the stories, we're going to actually be seeing, hopefully here in the next few days, a lawsuit from a teacher coming out here in Rochester to her district, that when these teachers question what's going on here with the COVID response, they are literally retaliated against. They're thrown onto full virtual courses. They're told they're no longer going to have their classroom assignment next year. Superintendents will do anything to silence them, just like they'll do anything to silence me or you or anyone who questions them.
So they're being held hostage. Their job is now on the line if they dare go against the narrative. Dale says, are there any teachers standing up against the unions? Dale, I want to tackle on this for a second because it's a great question. And Christina kind of addressed it a minute ago. We have to remember, the teachers' unions, and Christina, correct me if I'm wrong because you belong to a union, the teachers' unions are supposed to be working on behalf of the wishes of the teachers. Is that fair to say? You join the union so the unions can fight on your behalf. So technically, you as the member should be dictating to the unions how we move forward, not the other way around. So why do I feel like the unions are the ones telling the teachers what to do? How you're paying money into the union for them to tell you what to do? That is the most insane business model I have ever experienced in my life. I mean, it's ridiculous that these teachers bend over for the unions that they pay money to for them to represent. What's going on here?
Yeah, so it's amazing. So I'm in the fortunate position where I teach part-time. So if for whatever reason, SUNY wanted to retaliate and fire me, it's not going to make or break me. I'll still be able to live in my house and live my lifestyle. For many teachers, though, this is like they put food on the table, they pay their bills, right? Being full-time teachers. And they just don't care. There's been numerous times where I've received a letter and they're like, we're fighting on behalf of our teachers, and they're just spewing all this garbage. None of it I believe in.
Mm-hmm.
We need more masks.
No, I don't believe
more money, and we need more this. And so I'll call them up. I'll call up the president, of the union. I'll call up his assistant, whatever she is, and I'll say, I got your email, and stop speaking on my behalf. I don't agree in anything in this letter. And they literally are like shocked. They act like they're shocked to hear from you. And then they just keep going with their agenda. And that's what's happening here locally with the K through 12 schools. Teachers are brave enough. They try to speak to their union members about it. They sit there, they you, and they just keep going because there's a bigger agenda that's rolling out, and they really don't care. Either you're going to go with it or you're not. And, I've asked teachers repeatedly, I've tried putting out calls to action that these teachers, they need to put on their big boy girls and pants, or big boy and big girl panties, you get my point. And they need to band together and they need to fight back. Stop coming and complaining to me about it. Mm-hmm. You need to find teachers in your district that are in the same exact position as you, because I know there's more of you than there are of them that want to keep these schools closed, and you need to fight. And I've said it from day one, Matt. The road that we're headed down, and when I say schools are going to look different in the next couple of years, teachers don't have the job security they think they have. There's going to be major change here. So I ask teachers all the time to please reflect on this and fight for the career that you love, because the career that you love is no longer going to be what it is. Well, what it is today sucks, quite frankly, but what it was a couple years ago.
I mean, this isn't even a career right now. This is a joke. The way that we're, I mean, it just goes to show what a shit show the whole education system in New York really is. Because these kids have not been back to school. We've been doing this hybrid crap for a year now. Nobody's getting a real honest education. How do you even get into college with years lost? How do we compete? And I always tell parents this. I was like, listen, who do you think Florida State University is going to accept into their college when they're looking at a New York application and a Texas application, knowing that the kids have been in school in Republican states for the last couple of years versus a student who's barely had an education. And I love talking to certain teachers about this, or certain I don't want to bring politics into this, but I've talked to certain liberals about this, and they would never do that. That'd be illegal to do it. Or I've even talked to heads of administrations who work in other colleges and say, they'll never do that. They couldn't do it. It's illegal. Yeah. First of all, nobody seems to care what the law is anymore, right? We've already proven that. And just because it's illegal doesn't mean it's going through their mind. Let's talk scholarships. How many kids have completely lost any chance of a scholarship now because they needed their junior and senior year to show these universities, to show these athletic programs what they're all about? And now their chances are lost, which is why I've said, and I've screamed from the rooftop, when do the class action lawsuits start? When do we start suing all of these people involved for lost time? Because this is what happens. As a business, you sue if you screw with the business, right? And you jeopardize their revenue, they can sue you for lost earnings, right? You know, defamation of character, slander. If you do that to a business and they have lost earnings because of your actions, technically they can sue you for loss of earnings. So when do we as parents stand up to the districts and say, if you don't cut the shit out, we're going to start suing you guys for the loss of livelihood that you've inflicted on our students, because their students or their children, I mean, will never get these years back. They will never have another opportunity to play college football because they're not going to get recruited anymore. The coaches, the recruitment directors, they're looking at states and at athletic programs where these kids have been in sports the whole time. You miss 1 year at the high school level, you're done. I mean, your career's over. So do we have a shot here? Or, I mean, talk a little bit about, I know we spoke about class action lawsuits. Tell me about that, because I was appalled when I heard your explanation. I was like, well, let's rally together. Let's get a class action lawsuit going and start down this path. So tell me real quick, or tell the viewers here real quick, what you told me that I was disgusted by.
Yeah. So just to kind of fill in a couple gaps there from what you were saying. So you don't even know, Matt, the amount of parents who I've spoken with who have literally relocated their children to grandma's house down in Florida to continue to play football, continue to play baseball and such, because they knew that that was like their child's passion, and their children had full scholarships riding on their football careers, their baseball. Parents are having to take their children to different states. For the love of God, they're crossing over into Pennsylvania to do wrestling tournaments and college showcases and such, because we can't hold them here in New York State. And I've had this argument all the time with parents. I said, if your goal is to have your child go to SUNY, yeah, that's great. They'll get into SUNY. They want more sheep and children who are complying and doing what, you know, the good little government tells them to do. But in other states, you just won't be able to compete. It's done. And there are lawsuits that are going on here in New York State where people are suing for lost scholarships pertaining to sports and such. And there's a really big movement on Facebook and a group particularly pertaining to that. But what I talked to you about with the class action lawsuits is that there is a process to everything. And I'm not going to try to pretend like I'm the expert here with this, but from how the attorneys have explained it to me, is that first of all, you know, having our Article 78s heard, these cases that we're waiting on decisions for, would be the first step to be able to say, okay, there is legitimate concern here, damages, they were in the wrong, etc. The second piece then would be for class action lawsuits to even form, from my understanding, again, maybe there's an attorney on here that will want to chime in, is that a judge has to actually like approve it.
Right.
So
okay.
It has to
the
go
same judges who keep recusing all of your cases, who keep throwing out all the cases.
Right.
Those judges. Right.
Class action lawsuits take about a year to even get off the ground, because they have to be heard and approved, in essence, through the court system. Before then, victims, shall we say, or folks that want to take advantage of it, can even start signing on, and we can even start tallying the amount of damages that have been, incurred by the plaintiffs on a class action lawsuit. So if we can't get anywhere with a small Article 78, class action lawsuits are wonderful. It's part of our ultimate goal, because there are parents with massive bills for mental health, lost scholarships, private school tuition, daycare bills, and such that have been incurred. But we need to be able to do small things in this court system to be able to then move on to these large mass scale, shall we say, class action lawsuits.
Right. So where do we go from here? What do we do? I know you've got groups. Tell everybody about your group real quick because we're kind of at the end of our time here.
Yeah.
There's groups that you can join. Make sure you stay active in them. Tell everybody about the groups that you're hosting and how we need to keep fighting here to get back to the old normal, people, not this new normal crap. Okay. I refuse to have my little 4-year-old going into pre-K in the fall with that goddamn mask on his face. We need to get the masks off, and the V is going to be the next fight. But for now, what's your group name?
Yeah, so my group is Rock for Educational Freedom. You can also find us, that's on Facebook. You can also find us on the internet at reopenOurSchools.com. Other great groups, as many of you know, would be 585 Parents Against Mask Mandates, Cancel the Mask or I'll Cancel You, No School, No Taxes, which really was kind of, I think, born out of our initial efforts last year. Matt took the lead on creating that group for us. More to come on that. We have some time. But again, get on Facebook, get involved in these groups, go to your local board meetings. You have to stand up and do something. Now is the time. Don't depend on just folks like myself to pull us all through the finish line. I need all of you to help us.
Guys, don't forget, we are only this far because we've been fighting. If it were up to them, the kids would be masked up for the rest of their lives, and homeschooling would be the new norm. So let's not get it to that point. Let's keep fighting and get these kids back to school 5 days per week, all districts, all grades, without the mask. That's our next fight. Christina, thank you so much for joining us today here on our new show, The Red, White, and You. And if anyone else wants to come on the show, we go live every single day, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So send out an email to support@youmadeitpolitical.com or message me or Christina. Christina and I do a lot of work together. We'll make it happen. We'll get you on these shows. We welcome activists of all walks of life. Thank you guys so much. You have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you so much, Christina.
Thank you.
Good night.